Hello and welcome to the Hard Sell, where the stick in the swill-bucket rattles back. December is upon us once again, whether we like it or not, and that of course means the Christmas. And that, at least right now, means a festive Happiness in Magazines instalment. Well, it has the past couple of years anyway. In 2022 I looked at an early 70s Christmas radio times. Last year I looked at the 1969 Christmas TV times. So this year it's the RT's turn again, and we're zooming forward a good couple of decades to look at the last of the BBC-only festive double issues. It's 1990. What the fuck is going on? Well, all sorts of things, obviously. The fall of European communism is nearly complete, with the Soviet Union itself pretty much on its last legs, although it takes another year to finally disintegrate. And Britain just got shot of its own totalitarian dictator, albeit on the opposite end of the ideological spectrum, just a month before Christmas. Hooray! Oh, and it's increasingly inevitable that we're going to go to war with Iraq, but we're going to put that off until after the holiday. None of which has any bearing on the Radio Times, of course, but that's how things stood. In fact, the most important news item, as far as they were concerned, was the Broadcasting Act 1990, which was, of course, now law. You must know this one, especially if you've ever watched a video of mine before. This is the one that deregulated ITV, practically abolished quality control, and basically ruined absolutely everything forever. Among the carnage, the Act also deregulated the television listings industry in the UK, which previously had been a closed shop, the BBC printing their listings in the Radio Times and the ITV companies in the TV Times. It was a pretty anachronistic system anyway, and ITV had already washed their hands of it and sold the TV Times to IPC magazines, after pretty much every major franchisee dropped out in turn from the consortium. So anyway, from March the 1st, 1991, a Friday, just to make it even more awkwardly arbitrary, both the radio and TV Times would expand to include listings for all 4 channels, plus satellite and cable, as well as being joined by 10,000 odd all-new rivals, largely printed on tissue paper, sold for pennies, and going bust within 2 years. Exciting times then, no pun intended, and both major magazines embarked on publicity campaigns on the subject. TV Times managed to bagsy the Bob Dylan reference. In fact, I'd say they had the better campaign in general, at least in print, with the Radio Times equivalent, taking up the inside front cover of the Christmas issue, a little too cute and cluttered for its own good, and with just a faint, almost ineffable aroma of self-satisfaction, in that very BBC way, something which the no less self-congratulatory TV Times advert somehow managed to get away with. Didn't do much good though. They soon slumped to 3rd place behind both the expanded RT and the cheapoid newbies, and deserved to, because IPC had made the magazine so painfully crass and lowbrow since taking over that it was actually a relief not to have to buy the bloody thing anymore. Anyway, that's a tangent for another time, which is not a promise. Moving on to the next advert in the magazine, and it's special. The Renault Clio is a fact of life these days, one of the most commonplace subcompacts on the market, I expect. We all had to start somewhere though, and the Clio was originally launched in 1990 in a blaze of publicity. This was a time when Renault had only just started giving their cars names instead of numbers, so the mere fact it was called Clio was a big deal in itself. Here in Britain, of course, we had to wait until March 1991, because our cars are back to front. But that gave them time for a publicity campaign of their own, The Quest for Clio. This high-concept rigmarole is part of the back end of a minor but genuine craze for puzzle-centric treasure hunt-based campaigns that was inadvertently sparked off by madman Kit Williams and his book/activity Masquerade. Williams crafted a jewelled hair out of 18-karat gold and then buried it in the ground and challenged the entire population of the world to find it using clues hidden in the 12 paintings that made up the book Masquerade. These clues were insanely cryptic and abstruse, and surrounded by meaningless red herrings to boot, which were so complicated in themselves that their irrelevance wouldn't become clear until a not insignificant amount of effort had already been expounded. As a result, so many holes were dug throughout Britain, it's a surprise it didn't spring a leak. It must have seemed like the entire island was paying host to a 3-year mole convention. That's right, 3 years. The book came out in 1979, the hair wasn't found until 1982. But the story of Masquerade is yet another tangent for another time. Unfortunately, in this case, it's actually already been handled by a friend of the show, Ashens. Seriously, watch his TED Talk on the subject if you haven't already. This thing goes places. The point is that the notion of the armchair treasure hunt caught on, and caught on big time. There were dozens upon billions of rip-offs and cash-ins, and of course the world of advertising can't resist a high concept, so there are plenty of those as well. There was the Glad Bags $1 Million Mystery, which tied in with a remarkably shit film. The Fruit Gum's Secret, in which you had to somehow discern a random British postal address, including the name, from the visual clues across 3 posters, which seems as close to literally impossible as makes no odds. And the Cream Egg Conundrum, which just flatly plagiarised the whole thing, right down to the book and the solid gold treasure buried somewhere in the country. Obviously burying a car, even a super compact, was out of the question, so instead Renault present a puzzle for you to solve in order to make it to an even more involved activity day, where apparently the winners went through a whole load of Krypton factor bollocks before someone finally won the damn car. For all that though, you had to decipher these images, which I'm going to leave on screen long enough for you to study, or better yet take a screenshot of, so you too can feel like you're taking part in the quest for Clio. You are 34 years too late for the closing date though. Each picture represents some marketing buzzword that Renault were using to describe the Clio, both through vague allusions in the image itself and more directly by unscrambling the hidden letters I'm assuming you've already noticed. The grid at the bottom shows you how many letters there are in the word you're supposed to find, which is good because there are 1 or 2 red herrings, especially in the horse racing one. Probable answers will be given at the end of the programme. I say probable answers because I actually don't know for sure, but let's just say Kit Williams didn't make this. Oh, and beware that the JPEG compression seems to have messed up at least a couple of letters, but you should still be able to make an educated guess. All in all, thank God for Estelle Skornick and Max Duchamp. Something much less interesting next. Insurance. From Sun Alliance, who at the time had one of the least prepossessing mascots imaginable in Norman, a typically dull insurance salesman who happened to have the gift of 100% accurate precognition, and instead of using it for the benefit of mankind, exploits it for personal gain. Truly a hero for the 80s. Shame it's 1990. But here he is anyway, telling you to take out home contents insurance ahead of the winter weather, because it might could storm and such. You'll notice the colour's gone for a Burton. The magazine went full colour for the first time a few months earlier, but only the actual contents themselves. It took the adverts a little while to follow suit. Skipping ahead a few pages, an even more monochrome page containing British Gas's annual warning about gas leaks, tying in with that year's Animal Crackers television campaign, in case you were thinking the image is a bit random. This is a Christmas tradition that doesn't get talked about much, for fairly obvious reasons, but it did show up every year for a while, in one form or another, Christmas apparently being a bit of a flashpoint for gas-related mishaps. Not usually with this much white space. I'm guessing one of those vast empty tracts of land originally had a little peel off and stick to the fridge card, showing the basic steps, and most importantly the contact details for your local branch of British Gas, if you have one, which by 1990 you probably don't. Of course, this being the Christmas radio times, the one thing you can't move for, advertising-wise, is holidays. Turn of the year is the time to get those booked. Just about every possible operator or location short of Mercury has at least a tiny box pleading with you to go there, nestled in amongst a good half dozen others. and the odd advert showing a sad child and calling you a bastard for enjoying yourself at Christmas. I couldn't cover all of them if I wanted to, and they're much of a sameness anyway, but here's a couple in full colour. First, Eurocamp. See if the experience of camping is any less miserable if you pinch your tent in Portugal rather than Dartmoor. Spoiler, it is not. With the slogan, everything else is just camping. Which, I mean, yes, I suppose it is. Not sure if that's an important point. Second, an almost touchingly sincere attempt to make sunbathing on deck in the North Sea seem glamorous. Kato Mara could have told them not to bother. Not that it seems like a horrible holiday, assuming they're not lying about the quality of the cruise ship. This probably wasn't the angle to concentrate on, though, over and above the city breaks in Hamburg and Berlin, or the below-decks fine dining. Oh well. A couple of pages later, our first actual Christmas imagery, courtesy of teachers. Because Christmas is the time for alcohol, and a bottle of scotch does come in very handy during these cold winters, especially during a recession. With that in mind, enjoy a coupon for 30p off a standard-sized bottle of Teachers. Good until February. God bless us, everyone. Another holiday option, host season self-catering, where they bung you in a cottage and let you get on with it. The main impression I get from the advert is that this holiday will be highly efficient. All those crisply kerned sans serifs, sharp underlines and officious use of bolding. Doesn't make it seem like much fun will be had, but if I wanted fun I'd go to Alton Towers, not a log cabin in the Lake District. Or even yet, come to the Grampian region in the dead of winter and see how you like that. It is very beautiful up there, of course, as the image on the left-hand page attests. But then you look to the right and you're hit with prose purpler than a whole acre of heather. The Highlands and Islands of Scotland. You say the word softly, and you're almost there. An image catches your eye. Floodlit romance and purple-clad hills. It all whispers of escape. Your arse is out the windy, mate. Maybe I'm oversensitive to this sort of thing. I'm from Cornwall, so I've had to hear the place where I live described in such railway paperback language my whole life. It's deeply annoying and faintly embarrassing, especially that last bit. It whispers of escape. Unless you happen to live there, in which case there is no escape. Moving on, more actually Christmas-related material next with boots, and a slogan which probably seemed like a better idea when they came up with it than it actually was in the cold light of day. Buy 2 tapes and get a free recorder. Nothing wrong with the gimmick, although it's a bit low-key. Everyone needs VHS tapes at Christmas, at least in 1990, so as to record their own copies of that year's big, festive TV treats and movies. Most notably that year E.T. The problem is that the pun in the headline could be said to act as an overpromise. Diary is a recorder, you see, in that you record your pitiful, meaningless life in it. Possibly. To be honest, it's a bit of a stretch, and there's a danger you might inadvertently end up leading the reader on with accidental promises of a free VCR, only to let them down at the last second, and just foster resentment towards your brand rather than loyalty. Of course, it's more likely that no one will notice or care, because who pays that much attention to these things without getting paid for it? More Christmas wishes a few pages later from the Nationwide Building Society. Not much to say about this really, largely because I have no idea what any of the copy means. I do notice that it pretty much gives up on any Christmas-related wordplay after sentence 3. I don't know, maybe these things, whatever they're talking about, did create a whole swathe of millionaires by the end of 1991. Somehow I doubt it, though. Another couple of pages and it's time for more scotch. Wait, we've seen this before. Yeah, it was in the TV Times issue from the 1988 Olympics. So much for quality in an age of change. To be fair, the bottle seems to have been very, very slightly redesigned, or it could just be the scanner quality. and the slogan's in a marginally different font and a few pixels lower. Well, that is technically change, just at a geological pace. More holidays. Not really for the likes of you, though. Yes, it's P&O in the Caribbean, apparently channeling Ned Sherrin for a copy. Imagine, if you will, gentle reader, a Caribbean cruise on the Crown Princess. Imagine it hard now, because it's the closest you're ever going to get. All this for as little as £895. Interesting use of the term "as little." In 2024 money, that's a shade over £2,000. Sets out its stall nicely, though. These holidays are strictly for people who can describe that kind of cash as little. Send this coupon to Kathy Robinson. She could do with a laugh. And now, Scotland. One advert is never enough, apparently. They really want you to go there. This is for the whole country, though, not just the top end, and in fact includes a map of the region so you can let them know just how far into the place you're prepared to go. Photo's not as pretty this time, but it is appropriately reminiscent of the cover to The Week Never Starts Around Here by Arab Strap. So there's that. The ever-expanding trilogy of Scotch adverts ends right before the listings themselves with a rather confusing Surrealist double-page spread for Glenfiddich. According to the inexplicably melted text, it's a time you call your own. And to illustrate that, a haunted clock, whose hands have joined forces to make a sort of mutilated stick man lounging in an armchair next to an absolutely colossal bottle of the stuff, in front of a roaring fire in which, rather disturbingly, they're burning the numbers between 10 and 1. I have no idea what this could possibly mean, and no desire to find out. I will, however, note that Scotland really is all over this magazine. If you're not being implored to go there, you're being sold their whisky. Even those videotapes were Scotch. There's also a lot of financial advice in here. The Halifax are the latest to pipe up, then still a building society, hence the. They want to help you buy a house, because, you know, property ladder and all that. Pretty much the sole purpose of existence at this point. There's some vague blather in the copy about New Year's resolutions, but this really could have run at any time of year and probably did. One last double-page spread, and thank God it's Woolworths. We couldn't have gone on much longer without them. Promising peace to mankind is a little above their pay grade, but of course what they really mean is a way to make the kids shut the fuck up for 5 minutes. Several, in fact, in the form of various VHS videos. Quite a mixed selection as well. Can't say fairer than Fireman Sam and Postman Pat, of course. Brave Little Toaster is cool, and its relative obscurity could come in handy for creating future hipsters. There's creamy Don Bluth goodness in The Land Before Time and An American Tale. And of course E.T. remains one of the best films ever made, even if you could get it cheaper by recording it off BBC One after the Queen's speech. Even Garfield's Christmas special is actually quite good for a laugh or two. On the other hand, Pinky and Perky can sod off. The Best of Blue Peter is bound to be of more interest to the parents than the kids, and speaking as a member of that particular generation, I don't remember any of us actually thinking Ed the Duck was cool in the slightest. And then there's the infamous Turtles How It All Began video, which I received that year from a relative distant enough not to know that I didn't actually like the Turtles that much. I could write an essay on this baffling compilation, apparently put together by a madman in a hurry. But it still beats Mac and Me. Over the page from that, cars again. In fact, a direct rival to the forthcoming Clio, the Seat Ibiza, the most popular of the Spanish Marques models. Like the Clio, it's still around to this day. I say Spanish, they've been owned by Volkswagen since 1986. Already in 1990, almost all its parts are German, most notably the much vaunted Porsche engine. It's a way of having a Porsche without paying for a Porsche. Or actually having a Porsche, for that matter. That's almost it, really, as the adverts fall away once the listings themselves begin. A few pages later, there's more financial jiggery-pokery with Abbey National, which is now a bank. Apparently Tessas are now a thing, which I'm sure is great if you're a person who knows what a Tessa is. The illustration's quite interesting though, making light of the already famous trope of the tropical island tax haven, with which the rich have effectively defrauded us all for decades. I'd like to think we wouldn't find it as funny now, but I can't make myself believe it. A couple of pages later, it's the inevitable post-Christmas sales. The late and possibly even lamented DIY chain Texas have a whole bunch of offers for you, all plastered noisily around the page. It's so cluttered, in fact, that it's barely comprehensible. In fact, I'm only showing it to you at all for contrast with the next advert a couple of pages later. Another sale, another home care store, but this time it's Allied Furnishings and it's actually quite classy. A big, cosy Christmassy image, as much information as we need, communicated clearly, no visual shouting. Of course, they do have the advantage of a colour page, but they still use it better than Texas did. Still, both brands died out in the end, so there you go. Nothing matters. Next, more holidays courtesy of Blake's. Make your own Liberator joke. Them and Ho Seasons basically cover the same sector, but Blake's, as you can see, are more stylish. They're not above making puns and using massive images rather than extensive copy, which lay them into the left-hand column in elegant italics. Altogether more relaxed and classy than Ho Seasons, I trust you'll agree. The holiday experience is probably more or less identical, though. After pages and pages more of square please come here messages, the last full pager on the inside pages is, randomly enough, for some mouthwash. Plaques. Dental health advertising, as in many other cases, is basically a history of new conditions to be tackled. In the 70s, the word of the week was cavities, and there were thousands of new cavity prevention formula brands. In the 80s, it was tartar, and you had to buy special tartar control spin-offs. By the turn of the decade, though, it was plaque, which was distinct from tartar in that don't ask questions, you little bastards. So it was that Colgate brought out plaques, which shifted more plaque than brushing alone. A statement, like 8 out of 10 cats, that had to be qualified more and more as time went on. Thank God for visual inspiration then, and specifically the striking image of a toothbrush transformed into a highly Trogdorian beefy arm, complete with beef-related pun. It's good to see Christmas acknowledged one more time as well. The inside back cover is just an extended preview of the New Year's delights in Radio Times, including the expansion, so we'll skip to the last advert on the back. And after years of both the radio and TV Times ending on spots for Butlins every Christmas, this year we've got something very different. Yes, it's the BBC self-promoting in their own magazine, Hush. It's Muzzy! Originally made in 1986 to teach English as a second language, its makers soon hit on its potential in the opposite direction. And indeed Muzzy is still used to this day, albeit in a rather ugly new CGI form. And here it's actually part of a trend. There have actually been a couple of adverts earlier in this magazine that I skipped over, just to confuse you, for the likes of Linguaphone and other such send-away language learning courses. And indeed I remember seeing such things advertised in Radio Times a lot around this time. I think it's because of the impending transition from the European Community to the full-blown European Union, and the closer ties to those foreign nationals from the continent that it implied. Britain was taking its place as part of an international fraternity on equal standing with the likes of the French and Italians and Germans, and the next generation in particular needed to be equipped to navigate it. I don't know what this facially scarred bald bloke has to do with anything, though. And that, at length, is that. Christmas 1990. All the holidays and whisky are to be expected, of course. I must be surprised at how many banking adverts there are. Thatcher had just left us in a recession not entirely unlike the one she joined us in. It feels a bit like the banks and building societies are preparing themselves for it. A bit like how the Boxing Day January sales are essentially a clean-up exercise for retail. Or indeed how 1990 itself, like most 0 years, is essentially a buffer, a deep shuddering breath as the zeitgeist expels the last of the 80s and looks for clues as to its new identity in these uncharted 90s. There's a general sense of looking forward as the new decade really begins in earnest. The Clio is the subcompact for the 90s. The Abbey National warned darkly of the approaching recession hit 1991. And there's the Euro-happy subtext behind Muzzy's language course as well. Even with a war coming, there's a certain impression of tentative hope for the future. What must that have been like? We may never know.
Christmas. 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 Christmas.
And there's a turkey in the wings. He'd like to dance and he can't sing.
To Christmas.
One Christmas catalogue. Too many.
Christmas. To Christmas.
One Christmas catalogue for you.
Christmas. To Christmas.
You just sat through a Bob the Fish production. Nice! If you haven't already, you absolutely must check out bobthefish.org.uk. Literally hundreds more videos not unlike that one, adding up to days worth of entertainment and all absolutely free. But if you're not a cold-hearted skinflint, you can always support us on Patreon. For as little as anything at all, you can make programs like the one you just watched possible in the first place, and become eligible for bonus material such as glimpses of the book I'm writing about the BBC, monthly riffings on random commercial breaks, the complete archives of the angry political satire magazine Two Sons, and even the odd very occasional bonus video essay unavailable anywhere else. If nothing else, you should prevent me from starving and or freezing to death in the foreseeable future, so that'd be nice. No pressure or anything. bobthefish.org.uk. You make it what it is.